another episode of George on Sports with myself, your host, Georgeonsports, and Cameron Hogwood from Sky Sports. Cameron, if you thought week 1 was nuts, week 2 was off the charts. Now, I said it on our episode last week, I can't help but feel like we are approaching the end of the season with all the crazy results, but we're actually at the start of the season. We had 3 games that resulted in comeback wins. The Cardinals coming back to beat the Raiders in overtime when Kyler Murray is just doing what he does and making magical plays. The insane game with the Ravens and the Miami Dolphins. I can't wait to talk on that one because that was a game to shut up the critics, I think, and also the Jets who came back to take on the Browns. So I'm going to start with the Ravens game because we know Lamar Jackson and the Ravens weren't able to come to a deal in terms of a new contract. So he's playing only $32 million amount for this season. And if you ask me, if you're Lamar Jackson, number one, you want to stay healthy. Number two, you're kind of out to prove why you deserve said contract. Flip the other side of the ball, we look at the Dolphins. They have a new head coach. They've basically built their team to kill with speed, essentially, with the likes of Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert in the backfield, Chase Edmonds. And then there's Tua, who has been mentioned in every single podcast that I've been on every podcast that I listen to. He's not good enough. He doesn't have the arm strength. Why have they traded for Tyreek Hill when they can't even get him the ball? And then you see the game that happened on Sunday. Now, Lamar looked like he was on fire, and he was on fire. The Ravens were firing on all cylinders, and this is without their starting running back, J.K. Dobbins, and Gus Edwards, who's still injured. And they were clicking. They were moving the ball down the field, and they were up, I think, 28-7 or 35-7 at one point. And then in come the Dolphins, who completely torched the Ravens in a ridiculously... I don't think many people expected this kind of win from the Dolphins, especially when you look at the news stories and what people were saying about Tua and Tyreek in particular. But from what I saw, the Dolphins look legit. I mean, they look like they really are here to play. They look like they're playing for that second spot in their division because we know they won't top the Bills, and the Patriots don't look great. What were your thoughts on that game between these two?
I think on the Lamar front, I think the crazy thing about this game was, if you look back, the Ravens' offense was so clean. It did nothing wrong. It did nothing wrong in that game, and they still lost. And Lamar was unbelievable. And you're looking at the Ravens' ownership, and they're kind of sweating because as soon as he tears away for that 79-yard touchdown run, that price shoots up again. Look, like you say, fingers crossed for him that he stays healthy because you know what this league is like, you know what can happen, but he's heading towards a historic contract because there is nobody like him that we've seen in this league. You can talk about Michael Vick and Cam Newton. He's so different because he's just another level in terms of that athleticism, and we're talking about that athleticism on the same par as what he does with the ball in his hand, because you can rarely fault what he does as a passer these days just because he's so slick. I've always loved Lamar's mechanics. I think he's great to watch as a kind of the kind of velocity he gets on a pass, and that link up with Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman. We talked about what would they do over the top this season, and kind of as that backside take a top of a defense receiver, he's looking like everything they needed in that regard. And it takes something. Let me tell you, it takes something to run away from Xavier Howard, and he left him for dead, kind of on that slant on that deep over for the long touchdown run. And it was one of those games where you can't really fault the Ravens too much. I think it came to the Dolphins being the Dolphins and this Mike McDaniel team that believes in itself, that just goes to show plain old, simple, ridiculous speed can still kill in this league. And they put together this 4x100 relay team as an offense, and look what it does. Tyreek Hill is maybe the most transformative non-quarterback offensive player in the league. In terms of, you watch when he breaks off the line of scrimmage, he'll put his hand up 15 yards before Tua's even kind of thought about releasing the ball, because he's so quick. He'll beat any kind of bracket coverage, any fly route, go route. He's beaten you before you can even think about it. At the end of the day, it came down to there were a few blown coverages from the Ravens side. That's what kind of unlocked that space for Tyreek. But one, he creates that just because he's so quick. He gets those extra few yards that you might have gotten away with on another day. And then it also comes down to Tua spotting those blown coverages and having the confidence and the conviction to pull the trigger where a couple of years ago where he's coming back from injury, getting his confidence back, he might not have done so. And that was a criticism of Tua where there were openings down the field that he kind of overlooked. That's why Ryan Fitzpatrick came back in. But he did it so seamlessly. There was not a second thought in his mind. And that is him kind of developing, getting his confidence in this offense that suits him. And Mike McDaniel putting together this kind of smoke and mirrors, cloak and dagger offense where there's so many moving parts. Fullback Alec Ingold has become such a key part of this offense where he's almost this decoy where you're not too sure if he's running a wheel route or if he's going to kind of smash you in this pin and pull kind of wham look run game. And just everything about this Dolphins team was just electrifying. Everything you'd want in a Miami team under Mike McDaniel, who is so geeky and cool, by the way.
Yeah.
And just, if you're a Dolphins fan, Mike McDaniel spoke in the week. He wanted this team to go through some kind of adversity early in the season to see how they responded. They'd done that. This was the perfect tone setter for this team and this season. And you're almost a little bit scared about what they can go on to do now. A team full of confidence. A team where, at the weekend, that offensive line was maybe the biggest question in front of Tua. Looked good. Terran Armstead looked like he was settling in again. Greg Little, who came in last week because of injuries, looked really good on that offensive line and as solid as it looked in a while. And then we all know what this defense can do. And the most impressive thing was they tried to kind of replicate that cover zero blitz look that kind of defeated Lamar last season in the first half. Didn't work. Adjusted at half time. Josh Boyer adjusted and look what happens. And he finds a way to let this offense get back in the game. And just a really impressive rounded performance where they had to make adjustments. And Mike McDaniel must be over the moon with how everything's translated so far.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned there in particular was obviously every time Lamar does something great, that paycheck is just looking better and better. Whether it's breaking up the long yard or throwing. I think he threw 3 touchdown passes last week and another 3 this week because people questioned his arm. People questioned whether he can be both the runner and the pocket QB, and he can. But credit to Mike McDaniels. I mean, you look at what they did at the end of the game where they could either go for the tie, and he's thinking, absolutely not. This is a game to win. And when you have someone like Tyreek who can line up in the backfield and attract the attention of all your linebackers and flow to whichever way he's going, you then have someone like Jalen Waddle or Gesicki who can take advantage of that. And that's exactly what they did in both scoring a couple of touchdowns and the winning touchdown for the game as well. In a great game, 42-38, one of the games of the week, I've got to say. We'll move over to the slightly underwhelming but also impressive Jets win over the Browns. Now, the Browns, obviously, we know the situation. They're in a bit of trouble. Jacoby Brissett is not a starting caliber quarterback who isn't really going to win you games, and we saw that in the game on Sunday. But you still have guys like Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb has scored 3 touchdowns on his own, pretty much carried the team on his back. But the Jets, who are starting Joe Flacco, by the way, who God knows how long he's been in the league. He returned in week 1 to face and lose against his former team in the Ravens. But in week 2, he and Garrett Wilson have a connection. And I know he was banged up for a little bit, Garrett Wilson, and he came back in the game and they ended up winning 31-30. Now, I don't think a lot of people saw this coming, including myself. I pretty much thought the Browns would take this win regardless of the adversity they've got going on. But the Jets just did not want to die.
Yeah, perfect way to put it, I think. I think it was one of those games where when I was working on Sunday, I wasn't really... There's always a game where you don't pay too much attention, and I was kind of blind-eyeing it for a long time, and then suddenly I'm like, how on earth are the Jets back in this game? And I think it was funny hearing you speak about Jacoby Brissett not being a starting quarterback, knowing full well you've been through that story, and you know full well that you've been through that pain. And I wrote at the beginning of the season, the thing with Jacoby Brissett is they've had 5 months knowing Deshaun Watson was getting suspended, 5 months to decide with him whether he was the man that could help them survive and kind of keep the fort, hold the fort until Deshaun was back. 5 months to decide whether there's anyone else better out there than him to kind of keep this playoff hopes alive. 5 months to decide whether they made a mistake. If it didn't work out early in training camp, they had time to go out and fix it, and they stuck with him. And I'm not sure he's going to be able to keep them in this hunt. When you look across the league, how strong some of these teams are looking, and how kind of mistake-ridden some teams are, and you're expecting them to get better. I'm not sure what we'll see from this Browns side. They're a big mystery to me. The fact that they let the Jets back in so easy is a real concern for them and for Kevin Stefanski. Beyond Myles Garrett, you're looking for players who can take this team, strap it to their back and carry it along with them, and I'm not sure they have too many of them. Amari Cooper has looked like he's settled in fairly nicely, but Amari Cooper doesn't strike me as somebody who can carry a team, and you're looking to Nick Chubb. Sooner or later it becomes a little bit too predictable with kind of these 21, 22 personnels where you're using these heavy sets to kind of unleash the run game and kind of get these tight ends involved, and you're wondering how multi-dimensional this Browns team can be, which has always been the problem. That was a problem with Odell and Jarvis Landry and Baker, that it was always a run first offense, and it looks that way again. And if you've got Brissett under centre, there's not much unpredictability in terms of what's happening. And I do worry for this Browns team. But like you say, with the Jets, I liked Robert Saleh saying he was keeping receipts, which you beat the Browns, so there's going to be more receipts. I'm not too sure how much we can read into this win for the Jets. But like you said, Garrett Wilson, absolute stud. Elijah Moore, Corey Davis. This offense has everything. For when Zach Wilson comes back, they have everything they could need. The offensive line is a little bit of an issue still, but weapons-wise, there's everything you could ever want in that team.
Great running backs too, and you're right. I think people are saying the same thing. Zach Wilson hasn't even played yet, so when he does come back, be it week 4, week 5, I think you can expect more fireworks for this kind of offense because they do have the talent there, and I do think they'll win a few more games. How many, I'm not too sure, because again, their defense isn't lights out, but they're definitely able to put up points. And a great win for Joe Flacco, who continues to win games in this league after how many years. I want to move on to the Cardinals game. Now, this game, I mean, you talk about the AFC West to start with, and people, have their predictions in terms of where the Chargers will finish, where Kansas City will finish, and the Broncos, etc. And truth be told, it's the Chiefs who have looked like the strongest team in that division at the moment. But the Raiders, who lost their first game and now lost their second game, which you cannot do in the AFC West. It's just impossible to start 0-2. Lose in a ridiculous comeback game to the Cardinals. Now, this is a Cardinals team who has gone through turmoil this whole off-season with regards to Kyler and the unfollowing on social media, the homework clause in his contract only to be removed, and the number of injuries they have. No DeAndre Hopkins, who's obviously a Pro Bowl receiver who would do wonders for Kyler Murray. The run game, you've got Connor, pretty much Connor himself, who isn't the be all and end all, but he's able to keep things ticking, although he was a bit banged up in this game. You've got Rondale Moore, who's injured as well. He's another sort of a scat wide receiver who hasn't been able to play. So it kind of leaves you with, you do have Hollywood Brown, who did show up in this game. AJ Green, who obviously ex-Bengals, is kind of past it now. And then you've got Zach Ertz, who is a little bit banged up. JJ Watt returned to the defense, which is good news for them. He was effective. But I mean, at one point, the Cardinals were down by 2 touchdowns, I believe. And the Raiders didn't necessarily get things going. They managed to get to Baker quite a few times. He was sacked a couple of times. And I'm just really shocked because the Cardinals, normally they start really well and the house of cards kind of falls down towards the end of the season, as we know. Except they haven't been able to start too well because they're missing so many weapons. But in this game, Kyler Murray almost proved to people why he deserved the contract that he got, because he single-handedly won this game with those wheels of his. He runs so fast, it's ridiculous. And although he takes up to 20-something seconds to score 2 points on a 2-point conversion, they end up winning the game. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I kind of loved at the end Cliff Kingsbury running around celebrating when he'd done absolutely nothing. I mean, don't celebrate. You did nothing to win that game. Like you say, that was all Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray strapping the team to his back, which we've waited for, which he has done in the past, which is what he can do, and winning a game for them. And that final play to kind of get it to overtime and then to win the game was just that was why you pay a quarterback big money for them to go on and win games like that, which is why Kirk Cousins is such an enigma, because he can't do that in Minnesota. And I think that the Cardinals almost shot themselves in the foot in that first half, because that defense is just lacking a consistent pass rush, and it just invites pressure. Yeah. And JJ Watt coming back, great, but how consistent and how regularly he's going to be a factor, you don't know. And that linebacker kind of second level defense is such a big part of what Vance Joseph wants to do in that team. We saw Isaiah Simmons, who was meant to be this kind of hybrid star linebacker, as Nick Saban likes to call it, where he does kind of drop into coverage, he does kind of run downhill, he does kind of play off ball. They need to really quickly work out with him and Zaven Collins what they want to do with both of them, because at the moment they're kind of floating between the two without really having a difference. And this defence isn't quite sure whether it wants to blitz constantly or whether it wants to kind of drop into a shell coverage and try something different for Vance Joseph, because it's just getting torched week in, week out at the moment, and there isn't any kind of synergy there. But in the second half, Kyler Murray steps up, comes back, kind of compensates for kind of these question marks on defence, and does what Kyler does, gets the ball in his hands, works outside the pocket. And I think once the losing their best players on offence is a big factor. Of course it is. DeAndre Hopkins makes plays. He's a playmaker. He goes and finds the ball. You can put a bad ball in a tough spot and he'll make a catch. I think we saw with Zach Ertz and Kyler Murray, there's a few miscommunication kind of errors there. There's a few kind of routes that will misrun. And they're still kind of easing their way back in. But I think you have to just entirely focus this on Kyler Murray and what an exceptional athlete he is, what a great arm he can have. And this is what the Cardinals should be. They should be an exciting team to have you on the edge of their seats because they have those kind of players, and it's kind of nice to see a bit of that at the weekend.
And how do you feel about the Raiders? They started 0-2. You know, they've got the names on the squad. They've got the triple-headed monster in Renfro, Darren Waller and Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs even in the backfield. They've got Abdullah as well, who's ex-Lions and Vikings, and Bolden too. I mean, what's going wrong for the Raiders? Are they just not clicking? Is it been under a new head coach? Are you worried? Are you panicked about the Raiders?
I wouldn't say I'm panicked about the Raiders because I'm never too high on them anyway. Like, coming into a year, I mean, Devontae Adams 2 catches for 12 yards is a joke, by the way. I mean, that can't happen. And you're watching the film back, and there's a few still, even though him and Derek Carr played together in college, they weren't on the same wavelength at times, which is a worry. I think there's big pressure on Josh McDaniels to do something this year. We all know kind of that history in Denver when he had that year as a head coach, and he tried to be somebody he wasn't. And not saying he's doing that this time, but that's what has heaped pressure on him coming to this job. And you definitely look at them. If it wasn't for the Broncos being so disjointed as they are, you'd say the Raiders are maybe out of this division already. But I think it's still early. A lot of these offenses across the league are making some weird mistakes and weird decisions. And like we say, this was Kyler Murray torpedoing all the good work the Raiders had done. They won't come up against Kyler Murray every week, I guess. So I'm willing to be patient with this Raiders team purely because the weapons you mentioned there, they have to make something happen eventually. And I'm kind of interested to see where they go with this.
Moving on to the Broncos, on that little segue, I will come out and say I'm a little bit concerned with Nathaniel Hackett because I know this is his first role as a head coach, but I think, number one, it shows massively. They don't seem to know what they're doing. I mean, I felt the pain and the embarrassment of the boos that rang around in the stadium for your own team, your own Russell Wilson, Let's Ride, the Orange County, all of that kind of basically just died down. And when I heard those boos, I felt horrible for him, and I wasn't even there. But these kind of mistakes that they're making, whether it be the play clock or calling timeout at the wrong times and not making the right play calls, and it's very strange, I have to say, very strange. When you have a team that you've got weapons in Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, albeit they were a bit banged up. The tight end as well, Albert O, and the ridiculous 1-2 punch of Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams, and then you have your defence, which speaks for itself. What is this purely down to Nathaniel Hackett and his issues as being a first-time head coach? You could almost say, we mentioned head coach of the Raiders, McDaniels, who's obviously was with Bill Belichick for so long, took his job at the Broncos, and look how that went. Can you see the same thing happening here? Because they haven't started too well. They lost in week 1 against Seattle, which was nobody saw coming, kind of horrendous, although it was to Pete Carroll's delight. Week 2 against the Texans, they only put up 16 points. So are you concerned, or is this just a blip?
I think there's been more worrying traits as a first-year head coach than we've seen in some time from Nathaniel Hackett. The clock management is real rookie stuff.
Awful.
It's
awful.
I mean, the embarrassment when the crowd is counting down the play clock to help you not forget it. It's such a little thing. You can pass it off as kind of a joke or fun, but it immediately puts the team under pressure. And Russell Wilson is having to answer questions about this, and he's awkwardly trying to shirk it as a joke. And Nathaniel Hackett and him aren't quite married yet. It's a weird one. I look at Russell Wilson, and he's always kind of had this tendency in recent years. He just doesn't like throwing over the middle of the field, and we're seeing that again. It's such a plain and growing in prevalence that he doesn't like throwing over the middle of the field. And we saw he missed a wide open Javonte Williams for a touchdown. I don't know if you've seen kind of these clips on social media, but Javonte Williams is standing there. He could sit down, have a cup of coffee on it. Is that wide open? And Rush just doesn't see. He either doesn't see him or doesn't want to throw to him over the middle of the field. That's an issue. Yeah. And I'm not quite sure how much power Russell Wilson has in this offense at the moment. I don't know if Nathaniel Hackett is taking it upon himself to say, this is my team, I want to do this thing my way to start off with. I'm starting to wonder the reason why Aaron Rodgers loved him so much was because he said, Aaron, you do it. I'll just draw the plays. You do whatever you want. I'll just scribe them on a whiteboard for you. That was always the question. You don't know how much of a say he had in Matt LaFleur's offense in Green Bay. I think we're maybe seeing that early on. Not to write the guy off immediately, because like we say, it's so early. And this team is so full of talent that something has to work out eventually. He's come in and kind of reverted to this wide zone run game where Javonte Williams isn't entirely used to that. He is a kind of gap-centric guy who can just pound you and kind of break tackles. He's now having to work on his one-step cuts where it takes that kind of vision that he's trying to get back to that he used in North Carolina at times. So that is a transition where Melvin Gordon is getting the most of the carries in that regard. But just such a weird team. You're not quite sure what you're getting from them. And it's a little bit uneasy at the moment where they're kind of teetering on the edge of full-on kind of pressure in a division where that they felt like they found a missing piece to compete, and now they look way off the pace compared to the Chargers and Chiefs.
It's funny you say that, because there was a lot of talk actually about Nathaniel Hackett being a yes man, and that would kind of suit his time with Aaron Rodgers, because we know what Aaron Rodgers is like. We know he's very commanding, and you pair him with someone like Nathaniel Hackett, who does kind of seem like that kind of yes man guy, then what you say makes complete sense in terms of what's going on with the Broncos. But it's a slight concern, just because that AFC West is so stacked, and already the Chiefs, and then I'd put the Chargers second, are running away with this thing, and the Broncos need to work something out soon, and the Raiders really need to start firing on all cylinders. Like you say, Devontae Adams cannot have 2 catches in a game. It's just not acceptable. But on that note, I want to switch over to the Cowboys and the Bengals game. Now, obviously, Dak, he just has the most horrible luck when it comes to injuries. If it's not his ankle, it's now a finger, similar to what I think Russell Wilson had. And he's aiming to come back in, 4 to 6 weeks, more than likely too early. The Cowboys win this game. Now, they won against the Bengals side, who made it to the Super Bowl last season, with the likes of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and obviously their star running back Joe Mixon. Now, I think the Cowboys managed 6 sacks. I might be wrong, 5 or 6 sacks. Micah Pearson was everywhere. And the Bengals look like crap, to be honest with you. They just look like they're really struggling. Now, one thing to note is last season, the AFC North was pretty banged up, but the Bengals managed to stay relatively healthy. And the Bengals, the number of teams they faced that were injured, I think they placed second in the number of banged up teams that they faced in their run to the Super Bowl. And essentially what they're saying is they had a lot of luck. Now, it's the NFL. You need a lot of luck to get to the Super Bowl, because things don't always go your way. But I think what we're seeing now is, we're at the start of the season, teams are about as healthy as they can be before things start to decline. And the Bengals, just for some reason, although they have improved their O-line slightly, things just aren't going right. They lose to Cooper Rush, backup quarterback for the Cowboys, in a game where I think once that game kind of started, I think people knew how it was going to end up, and that was only one way, with the Cowboys win. What are your thoughts on the Bengals right now?
The thoughts is I'm concerned for Joe Burrow's health, who's on course to about 300 sacks this year, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, in all seriousness, that offensive line, you invest in Lau Collins in your right tackle. The guy just completely misses Micah Parsons for the entire game, as though he's invisible, and doesn't help. He's already a freak rushing off the edge, as kind of one of the best edge rushers you've seen in the league in recent years. And just a quick word on Micah Parsons, that last year they were kind of fleeting towards kind of shifting between him as an off-ball linebacker, which he came into the league as, and then kind of inadvertently landing with him as an edge rusher due to injuries. And this year we've seen them, they're actually starting to fully commit to him as a pure edge rusher, and that's pretty terrifying, because the things they can do with him now. And Lau Collins won't be the first, it won't be the last to get beat by Micah Parsons this year. But the biggest concern was miscommunication. They just weren't talking at Bengals' offensive line. They were missing blocks and missing assignments. Ted Karras, the centre, came in as well. He was meant to be a big off-season addition, and he's kind of, I did feel a little bit sorry for him at times because he's looking around, waiting for his guards and tackle to kind of get me Micah Parsons. And he, as a result, he's wondering, why have I not been left with anyone to block? Oh, it's because they're blocking the guy I'm meant to be on. Micah Parsons, which is true. Joe Burrow's on the floor again. But that offense all round has become far too predictable. I mean, as soon as Joe Burrow is under centre, they run it. As soon as Joe Burrow is in shotgun, they're passing it. You know exactly what's happening every single time. And Joe Mixon kind of alluded to it afterwards that there's not enough variation to this Bengals offense. You've got one of the best quarterback wide receiver tandems we've seen in the league, and that can go on to be one of the best we've ever seen in the league in Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And you're just not maximising them at the moment. And you can say whatever you like about, oh, of course they're going to double team Jamar Chase now because we know what he does. Move him around. Look what we didn't see it last night, but look what Kevin O'Connell has tried to do with Justin Jefferson. He's moving him around. Look what Sean McVay has done with Cooper Kupp. Moves him around that line of scrimmage, puts him in every single position, keeps people thinking. And Jamar Chase spoke in the offseason about kind of wanting to get the ball in his hands more, do a bit more yards after catch stuff, and get him doing that again, because you're struggling to find ways to get him involved in the game, and it just can't happen. If you don't get your best player involved in the game, you're going to lose. Just this offense altogether is spluttering at the moment. I worry for Zach Taylor. I don't think that the play calling was a little bit of an issue last year, and you can't entirely rely on Joe Burrow playing hero ball every third and fourth down, where he's having to pull something incredible out of the hat like we've seen kind of Russell Wilson do in previous years. That can't happen. It's not sustainable. These long 10, 11 yard drives where he's salvaging late downs isn't sustainable, and it just, this team altogether at the moment doesn't look anything like that playoff team we saw last year.
No. Do you think Cooper Rush, Ezekiel Elliott, Pollard, I think Brown as well, number 85, who's got a great connection with Cooper Rush because they practice quite a bit together, and the likes of CeeDee Lamb, and I think Dalton Schultz might be a bit hurt, but do you think they can hold on until that gets back?
I mean, if they're going off Sunday, it's hard because the Bengals are in a little bit of a hole early in the season, so it's hard to judge the Cowboys because they looked pretty disjointed in week one. I don't know. I've got more faith in them holding the fort than I do in Jacoby Brissett holding the fort in Cleveland. And also, I believe in Kellen Moore, Cowboys offensive coordinator, to do something to preserve this offense. But yeah, that's a big question mark. I think that Ezekiel Elliott is a key factor in that team, and when you've got a defense that can get you back on the field regularly, you're in a decent position, I guess.
So we'll quickly move on to the Lions game before we just touch on a few other shocking results. But the Lions look good. And in the off-season, the Lions were one of my sleeper teams in terms of, I loved everything. I loved how they finished the end of last season with Amon St. Ra doing some crazy stuff. Jared Goff, yes, we know he isn't the perfect quarterback, but I always say you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be half decent. You need to be able to use a play action. They've got a great run game with Swift and Jamal Williams, and then you've got weapons on the outside. And by the way, this is without Williams, who they drafted in the draft this year, who's off injured at the moment. So you're rolling with guys like DJ Chark, Amon St. Brown, St. Ra, who's just, I think he's on pace for some ridiculous stats. I don't remember what the stat was in particular, but he is on pace, and he's doing a lot of things. You've obviously got Hawkinson there as well. But I mean, Reynolds as well. Just Reynolds just scored a touchdown. The Lions look good. The Commanders obviously had a great week one start, and they put up 27 points. And Johan Doxson is going to be a great wide receiver for them. Antonio Brown is looking good as well. Logan Thomas has returned for the Commanders, a tight end, and he put up a touchdown. He can be pivotal for them, and I think he'll become one of the best friends for Carson Wentz. But I quite like the Lions. I mean, I like everything that they. I've said it multiple times. I love their energy that they come to games with, even in the games that they were losing last season. But I mean, they're doing pretty good. It's very, again, still early. We can only go by what we see. But what are your early thoughts on the Lions?
Yeah, excited by that team. I mean, for a long time, it was for a lot of Matthew Stafford's late years, it was kind of a hopeful, kind of not too much hope team where you're not expecting too much. And in comes Dan Campbell, who completely has changed this narrative, and it's very stereotypical to throw the kind of lots of heart, good fire to this team, but that's what this Lions team has become. They're gritty. They're not only gritty now, but they have talent, young talent across that team. It's a really nice young core. I think Amon Ra St. Brown is the perfect receiver for this Dan Campbell team, because
Yeah.
he was maybe the best contested catch guy coming out of the draft in his class, and maybe fell a bit further than he thought. And I know there's that cool clip in Hard Knocks where he reels off kind of every receiver taken before him in a draft, and they're kind of being very inventive and creative with him as well. They're moving him around a lot, not so much in week 2 as week 1, but he has become a focal point that the teams just can't guard. He's excellent in contested catch situations, excellent out of the slot, a good, really, really polished route runner.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, his dad is a former Mr. Universe, so he is stacked. Naturally, he is ripped. He is a strong guy, and just a well-built receiver. I'm really, really kind of excited to see how he develops. Like you say, Jameson Williams is coming back, who just adds a different dimension. I mean, we see a lot of what DeAndre Swift does in terms of yards after catch, which seems to go under the radar a lot. Jameson Williams will do a lot of that when he comes back into that offense when he's fit again. The offensive line looks better. Penei Sewell is finally kind of beginning to show that he was worth all kind of that draft hype that he got. The interesting thing is Jared Goff. Jared Goff, all he has to do is be conservative, I guess, to get them to where they kind of need to be to be at a foundation where they can begin building again. I'm not sure he's going to be the guy to help them compete again. But look at the end of the season. If they find themselves in a favourable draft position or in position in free agency, they'll go and nab a veteran quarterback or a draft quarterback who can suddenly they're contenders to do something in that division. And just I don't see them winning loads and loads of games this year, but just they're an exciting team to watch all of a sudden. I think they'll give teams problems. We saw last year they lost by 1 score so many times.
Exactly.
They'll be a trouble. They'll be a tough team to play against this year.
And then you have Adrian Hutchinson on the other side, who recorded 3 sacks in the first half of that game alone. So I think good things for the Lions are coming. Again, I don't know if they're going to win, multiple games, but I think number one, they'll win more games than they did last season. And I think it only bodes well for them to build on, again, guys like Jameson Williams to come back. It just means good things for them. And I think Dan Campbell is onto a great thing. Now, I'm not going to discuss this game because it's too heartbreaking. Here we go anyway. So the Colts, right? I'm going to quickly touch on the Colts, who lost 24-0 away to the Jags in what is now like the 100th time that we haven't beaten them away from home. It was a complete disaster, a horrible game, embarrassing, disgusting, shameful, every single word you can think of. Nobody stepped up. Play calling was atrocious. And it's been said afterwards that they're going to have a top-down look at everything. JT didn't have enough touches. Yes, we were out with our leading receiver, Michael Pittman Jr., rookie wide receiver Alec Pierce was also out. Shaquille Leonard was also out. But the point is, we shouldn't have to rely on said guys to win games. And I'm so sorry, but when you're playing guys like the Jags, who I will say they're an improved team under Doug Peterson, I'll give them that, and the Texans, these are games that we should be winning because, lo and behold, we now have Kansas City next. And I'll tell you right now, they're looking to put up 50-plus points if we don't get our act together. So I'm not going to go too much into the Colts because it's just too depressing, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm not a fan of Frank. I mean, I have been. Frank and Ballard, I think they're a great 1-2 tandem, but something is clearly going wrong here. And I'm looking at play calling, and I'm looking at Matt Ryan as well, who hasn't had a great start for whatever reason. He just all of a sudden looks really old and immobile and is making some horrible Wentz-like mistakes. So I'll just get your quick word on what you saw with the Colts, and we'll move on to the next game.
Yeah, I think my big takeaway from that Colts performance was where has kind of the zip gone from Matt Ryan's passing? It's just obsolete on the day, and I think too many times we've been so used to in recent years that offensive line being formidable for the Colts, and it's really dropped off at the start of this year, and as a result, Matt Ryan's having to freelance back there, which Matt Ryan doesn't freelance too much, so it's out of his comfort zone, and like you say, that affects the entire offense. I look around it, and like we say, you're missing Pittman, you're missing Alec Pierce, but you're lacking speed all round on that offense.
Yeah.
And Riley Cox is a good tight end, but he's not a burner. He's not going to fly away and create separation. He's a physical guy who creates separation through physicality mid-route and kind of breaking off those tight split positions that he starts in. But Riley Cox was mainly used as a blocking guy last year and somebody to kind of wham block and trap block in favour of Jonathan Taylor. So if he's having to do that, he usually did that in tandem with Jack Doyle. You've lost Jack Doyle. You've lost one big dimension of what Frank Reich loves to do, which is use his tight ends. And you're waiting for Jelani Woods. I have no idea what he's doing or where he is. He was always a big question mark, just because he's an absolute freak of an athlete. But you're wondering, he hasn't played tight end long. He hasn't run routes long. He was primarily a blocking tight end in college until final year where he's like, I want to run routes, so I'm going to run a few routes, and happens to be decent. But I imagine you have to transition him in at some stage just to give you that extra dimension that you're missing. But yeah, I look around, just speed is really lacking. And then in contrast, the huge contrast in that game was, you look at the Jags receivers where their problem last year was route concepts. There was zero separation for Trevor Lawrence to target, and suddenly Christian Kirk is getting open at will. They're getting really good separation, which is a very basic fundamental. But that's what Doug Peterson has done. He's making the job easier for his quarterback, giving him easier reads. And then Trevor Lawrence is growing in confidence off that. He's beginning to find tougher throws, bootleg out, kind of get on the run and make things happen. In contrast, your receivers just have zero separation. It's
none,
like zero. And
and this is why Matt Ryan holds onto the he holds onto the ball and then he gets sacked. So right. Other than JT, who didn't have enough touches, but this is the problem. We can't rely on solely JT, but it seems like we're going to have to rely on him quite heavily moving forward. With that, I'm going to skip the Colts completely and move on. I'm going to just reel off a couple of the results from some other games. So the Patriots overcame the Steelers in a 17-14 win with Mac Jones. We saw the Chiefs and the Chargers play, which resulted in a Chiefs. It was a close win, 27-24. Justin Herbert has come off a little bit injured with, I believe, some bruised ribs. We know Keenan Allen was already out, but he should be on his way back. The Saints and the Buccaneers game, which is always a tasty game to watch for reasons that involve Mike Evans and Lattimore. Both players were ejected. Mike Evans has actually been banned for the next game, but the Buccaneers hold on and win that game 20-10. The 49ers and the Seahawks. Now, Trey Lance, unfortunately, had a pretty grim injury to his ankle, similar to Dak's injury, but not a complete compound break, I don't believe. Trey Lance is pretty much done for the season, and in comes Jimmy G. Now, I will just quickly say, I do feel like Jimmy G was going to be inserted at some point in this season. They made him the highest paid backup for a reason, so I did think we were going to see him, but just not so soon. So that's unfortunate news for Trey Lance, and we wish him the best. They win that game 27-7. The Rams come away with a close win against the Falcons, who seem to be always in these games. I know it's only week 2, but the Falcons always seem to find a way to make it interesting. But the Rams win that game 31-27. And we go to the Packers, who won 27-10 against the Bears. Again, we had Alan Lazard back. They're using their running backs quite a bit because the receivers aren't yet up to scratch, but the Packers win that game and take the W. The Eagles-Vikings game, which was really, really interesting. So that was one of 2 Monday night games. The Eagles win that game 24-7. And for me, it looked like, for number one, Darius Slay had Justin Jefferson's number all game. And the Eagles just looked like a really great side. Hurts was passing the ball quite a lot, something that he doesn't necessarily do a lot of because he can run the ball, but he did both in this game. I think he scored 2 touchdowns and passed for 1 or 2. But great game for the Eagles. The Vikings, I mean, people question why they continue to put Kirk in prime time when this is what happens. And this is kind of what happens. And the other game being the Bills and Titans, where the Bills just look unreal. 41-7. Josh Allen does what Josh Allen does. And this is without, again, Tre'Davious White, cornerback for the Bills, who's still injured. And they also didn't have wide receiver Gabriel Davis, who was injured too. Up steps guys like Jake Kumaro. Obviously, McKenzie is obviously in there too. Dawson Knox. Diggs and Allen have got it going on. I mean, they look like an unstoppable force right now. The Titans, on the other hand, not great. We saw Malik Willis come into the game, and he did fumble, didn't look amazing. But quick word, before we finish on your team, the Giants, what are your thoughts on that Bills game?
The Bills, I mean, looking at the Titans, I'm not quite sure where they are. I mean, we know they want to run with Derrick Henry as much as possible, but you can't do it every down. I'm starting to question the loss of AJ Brown and kind of so willingly trade him away. And I get it that you want to avoid having to pay that huge contract so soon, but sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and accept that he is your offense at times. And we know the shelf life on running backs, and Derrick Henry's kind of defied that for a few years now, but that's going to run out at some point, and maybe that's this year. And he takes time to get going. He always has, kind of early in the season. He'll get up and running, but you're looking around that Titans offense, especially that receiving core. And there's a lot of pressure on Treylon Burks at the moment to make something happen in his first year. And I know he's a guy that can do a lot of things. You can move him around and get the ball in his hands as a yards after catch guy. He's very physical and can make good contested catches, but other than that, you're not quite sure. Robert Woods was a really good, smart off-season pickup, but he is more when he was with the Rams. They kind of used him more as this blocking guy and did this dirty work that kind of helped prop up this kind of fancy Rams offense. So you can't really turn to him as this immediate difference maker as a pass catcher. And I thought it was a bit of a shoddy move to Malik Willis in late. I mean, what a way to introduce the rookie.
Right? Yeah,
I didn't like that too much at all. I just thought keep Tannehill in. But the Bills, I think the only way you can beat the Bills this year is beating them in a shootout, because you're not going to stop them from scoring. And I can't think of many teams other than the Chiefs that might be able to do that. I really do believe they look like the most complete roster in the league. Two coordinators who for sure will be back in the talk for head coaching jobs come the end of the year. I'd be stunned if Leslie Frazier doesn't kind of at least become one of those favourites to get a head coaching job, because that defence is just ferocious. And Josh Allen he continues to come on leaps and bounds in that development, and it's really astonishing just his growth as an accurate passer, and still at the same time managing to be this ridiculous runner of the ball who can swat tacklers and kind of run like a fullback. He is just a freak of nature and absolute joy to watching this team, and I really struggle to see who slows this team down, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be wrong to say that I think a lot of people kind of have Kansas and the Bills as an early Super Bowl favourite, and I'd probably agree with that at the moment. But to end the show, we're going to end on a high and talk about the Giants game. Your New York Giants, who are now 2-0 after they beat the Panthers in a 19-16 victory. Now, I said it before, like I followed Saquon Barkley quite a lot, and I loved everything he had to say about the comeback. And if you have the good run game going, then everything else kind of is a little bit easier because you have to respect the run. The Giants are looking all right. I mean, yes, Daniel Jones wasn't perfect. He made some questionable plays. But what I like about Daniel Jones is his awareness and his smarts. For example, him making the first down with his legs at the end of the game as opposed to taking a potential sack, which sealed the game for you guys. He put up 176 yards, which isn't amazing, and 1 touchdown. But I think you can afford to kind of do that when you have someone like Saquon Barkley, or you even had your backup as well. I don't remember what his name was. But you had a backup running back who you used in a fullback position to sneak for the first down, and he went for some yards as well. So I like everything that you guys are doing. To me, it looks like you have a clear plan and you have a way of executing your plays, and it shows. Yes, it was a close game in 19-16, but I think you guys have come on leaps and bounds from where you were last season. How do you feel?
Yeah, just to shout out the man you just mentioned, Gary Brightwell. The man, the first down, the late down 4th-and-1 man. I'm really enjoying kind of the dynamic to this team. Brian Daboll has changed the environment completely, and I can get really carried away with myself in week 2 because we've won 2 games for the first time in ages, but you can see an immediate difference, and I love what he's doing in terms of setting the standards with Kenny Golladay is clearly unhappy, and he's clearly unsettled in that locker room, and he's not been nowhere near the field. Brian Daboll's kept him away from this team, and I respect that decision, because anybody who's unhappy with their role in this team, you don't play. Nobody's bigger than the team. And I think the exciting thing about this Giants offense, which is still, there's so many areas to clean up. It's not by no stretch of the imagination a perfect offense, because there's still errors being made. It's still, Richie James is our leading receiver after 2 weeks. That nobody ever saw that coming because of the players that we have. So you're encouraged by the fact that there's more to come in how we use Kadarius Toney, how we use Wan'Dale Robinson in multiple ways. So that is a plus, because you know that is Brian Daboll's strength. Getting small, nifty receivers in space and getting yards after catch. That's what we did in Buffalo with Josh Allen. He helped Josh Allen's transformation by giving him easy reads with small guys who could get in space and make things happen. That's what he's trying to do with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is, at the weekend, he did enough again to warrant us being encouraged that there's hope for him yet. There's a great throw over the middle of the field, kind of in triple coverage. I think it was Richie James, actually. One of his best throws I've seen Daniel Jones make. That was confidence, that was kind of conviction, getting the ball out quickly and just making a decision, a good read. And that was what you want. You want what you want from your team. The red zone situation with tight end Daniel Bellinger it was kind of an excellent. We saw Richie James come around on this sweet motion kind of wheel route, kind of drew the cornerback into a vertical deep into the end zone. That paved the way for Bellinger to kind of fake this trap block and then dart out to the flat and then just dive over. Yeah, excellent play call. It's just competent red zone play calling, which has been an absolute mystery for the Giants in recent years. And I love what Wink Martindale's doing with this defense. He's kind of really putting an impetus towards 3 safeties and 1 inside linebacker to kind of get more versatility at the middle of the field and kind of get Xavier McKinney as a focal point moved around, Julian Love. And there's more creativity across the board. Just even fundamentals like tackling. Tackling's cleaner. People are hitting people cleaner. The run game is cleaner. The offensive line looks much improved. Still a long way to go for rookie Evan Neal as well. But Andrew Thomas looks like one of the best left tackles in the league all of a sudden. And there are definite signs there that progress is being made, and winning breeds confidence, and you can only imagine what this has done for that team.
I mean, it's great. I mean, shout out to Dre as well, like another Giants fan who has suffered alongside yourself, Cameron, for some years. It's kind of like flip reversal now. I feel like I'm the one that's really suffering with this horrible start, and you guys are loving it up. But we're gonna bring the show to a close. I think it's been a great review of week 2, and I continue to say the same thing every week. The NFL is pretty much a definition of any given Sunday, with some of the games that we've had this week. But I've been your host, George, from Georgeonsports. Make sure you follow Georgeonsports across all socials so you don't miss out. With Cameron here from Sky Sports, and you can find Cameron's work on skysports.com. Follow him on Twitter as well, and also some of his recent work with UK Gridiron. But until then, we will hopefully see you next week for review week 3. But until then, stay locked and keep it cool.